Well, I'm gonna get started, everybody. This is a comedy of errors. So right now we have some new features. I'll cover those in a bit. Right now, let's just so what I want to talk to you about tonight is rocks and gold indicators. But first of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Prospector Jess from Hunting for Gold, and I have the site huntingforgold.com. Many of you are aware of that. It's we have the same name page, only it's huntingforgold.com in the Facebook fan page. So for right now, what I wanted to introduce you to tonight is the topic that we're going to do and kind of a protocol for how we're going to behave. And I want you to chime in and let me know what you think, specifically what characteristics you'd like to not have me do with the microphone. Sorry about that. That isn't too good. It's sorry about that. Oh, then it's good. My mic is muted. One mic is muted. No, they're both muted. Should not be muted. Huh. Are you hearing me okay? Okay. So if you have a chance, I'm going to be putting up a comment section here on the page for right now, just because it's going to help me get this thing going. This is our startup, our first inaugural new redo on live feeds in general, and specifically on this one. And I'd like to have a chance to kind of configure it and get it up and running a little cleaner, mainly because it's tricky to get these things set up right. And believe it or not, we've been exercising this all day, and now all of a sudden it's decided it wants to do something very different. So and that is pretty much Murphy in action. So like that. So for right now, let's just talk a bit about what we're going to do tonight. Tonight we're going to talk about rocks and gold indicators, and I'm going to be doing a little short presentation, and then we're going to go to your questions and answers. When we go to questions and answers, we will have a period where you can interact with me, and I will have a display on this front panel that you can see each other's comments, and I will be rephrasing the comment as I bring it in to understand it better, as well as giving you a chance to to listen in on what I answer for each person's comment. I also am going to be talking a bit about rocks itself and doing some show and tell. And as I do that, I want to kind of go through this configuration to iron out some of the kinks. So bear with me. I don't mean to cause a lot of grief, but this happens every time we shift technology. What we've done recently is we've gotten a whole new set of audio gear and a whole new video arrangement, and you'll see that in a second. So we're shooting with two cameras at the same time, and then I can go over to the whiteboard and talk to you on the whiteboard. I'll have a chance to kind of do a song and dance thing over here, and we will walk through some of the answers I give you over here if they require a chalk talk, or we'll walk through different kinds of presentation over on my desktop here, where I can kind of present things in the fashion that you give them to me. Each thing has its own merits in terms of visibility and so forth. The lighting that we have is not as good as it was about 2 hours ago when the sun was shining. That's also an issue we're trying to iron out. So bear with us when I reconfigure things a bit, just because I'm trying to bring in as much light as I can. The cameras I have, one is this one right here that I'm shooting with now. It's really got a narrow range of dynamic range, and the other camera is much better, but it's not focused on me right now. So if you will bear with me, we will carry on. So for right now, what I wanted to talk to with you tonight is gold and rock indicators, and specifically I'm going to go over here and switch out things a bit, stumble along. And talk to you a bit about what are gold and rock indicators. Well, specifically, there's some physical characteristics that are worthy of note. Now, I've spent some time talking recently at a couple of gold shows and talking with people online, and about this concept of physical characteristics and how important it is to understand this. And in doing that, I ran into some people who would like me to do some more material on this. So one of the things I'd like you to be able to do is give me your top questions on what you're looking for when you're looking at rocks and how they relate to gold. That helps me put together some ideas to explain this better in the future. Right now, what we're going to be talking about specifically have to do with the character of the rock and the minerals in it, as well as the formations that they've made. I'm going to put my headphones down. So when we talk about characteristics, we're talking about things like luster, color, crystals, so these physical characteristics make up some important things to watch for when you pick up a rock. You don't want to just look at the rock and say, well, that's just a nice piece of rock, or that looks really exciting because it's got lots of color. You want to know how the colors relate to the potential for gold and the kinds of minerals that go with gold. Because what you're likely to find is not so much the gold as you will find the minerals that go with gold. And I'll be talking about that in a minute. But what you're looking for are the kinds of things that have the right properties. So they might have magnetic properties. They might have certain properties with respect to chemistry or pH. They also might have certain properties with respect to the kind of material and fracture that it has. So it basically how the mineral structures in it break up when you apply pressure to them. Different minerals break along different lines. Some have nice crystalline structures and platy. Some break along what's called conchoidal. They're curved like a piece of glass breaking. And some things have this property where they basically will break along a specific line, or some things won't break at all. They'll just kind of crumble and fall apart. All of those things, all of those characteristics and more, which I won't have enough time to go into tonight, give you the information you're looking for when it comes to determining the kind of material you're dealing with and how to look for gold. What we want to do here is just give you a little teaser on that. I've talked about this at great length in the past. For tonight, what I want to do is kind of just give you a little bit of a teaser. These are some rocks that I've collected over years that have certain properties I like to point out. This one, for example, is a piece of quartz. You can see it looks kind of grungy and rounded. Well, grungy and rounded, when you find this as a kind of an oval or elliptical piece like an egg in a river, would tend to indicate it's been in there for a while. White tends to indicate it's full of quartz, and if you break it open, sure enough, it's got all these shiny crystalline facets, and notice they're broken like glass. They're conchoidal. That's a sign of quartz. But also notice the deep coloration along the edges. That deep coloration is what I was actually looking for, because that's an indicator, especially if it's rusty red, or if you just found it after a big flood and it came down out of a mountain and it was a deep blue. That's what the blue lead or tertiary quartzes were all about, and they were typically loaded with gold. So it's the kind of thing you start looking for these, because they'll lead you to lode elsewhere. They'll also lead you to some pretty good nuggets in the local area. Now, you might also find other minerals that have interesting dark patches. You know, they look kind of grungy, and then when they're broken open, they have these dark patches. Manganese. It's another mineral that's known to go with gold. So you keep your eyes open for that. You might also run into things from time to time that look like a big ball bearing. Now, this particular one has not as much heft as that piece of quartz does. It's not as dense. It also has kind of a funny texture, like it was ablated. That's a funny term for run against a bunch of hot air when it came out of a volcano. This is a little volcanic bomb. Okay, that's different from this one, which has this nice crystalline structure and looks like it's full of what looks like silica and some other little pockmarks. That's a geode. Okay, even though they're both spherical in their size and nature, they have different properties. They have different physical characteristics. So what we're looking for here is the characteristics that go with things we're looking for related to gold. Characteristics like greenish stones and what are called ultramafics. Might be characteristics that go with recrystallized materials, metamorphic. These things collect gold as well. So what we're looking for when we're looking for gold is the kind of material that goes together with that. Here's another nice piece of deep stained quartz. And the idea is we're looking for things that have that kind of staining because it's full of metals that have already corroded out of the quartz. Those metals are characteristic materials that have physical characteristics that go along with gold. Their physical characteristics have to do with their chemistry. They have to do with the kinds of formations that they take and the material that they collect with. All of those add up to a signature that you can use as an indicator. That's what I mean by indicator. It indicates that gold is in the region. It's not necessarily that that is gold. In fact, usually it's not a characteristic of gold at all. Here's another one. Nice deep red, full of quartz, but that's a piece of leverite. Why? Because it's so heavily loaded with rusty quartz that there isn't any gold in this area. Nearby, there are some that are almost black. Those guys have gold in them. But this particular region had mostly rust, which meant it was mostly iron sulfides, pyrite. Okay? That doesn't mean pyrite won't come with gold. Like, take a look at this piece right here. This is a nice piece of rainbow chalcopyrite. Let me show you these on the other camera because it's easier to show them. And then we'll move on to your questions. So here's that piece of chalcopyrite. Let it shine on there. Notice the rainbow colors to it and the kind of glossy, almost coppery gold color. That's because this is copper sulfide. But that copper sulfide, because of its physical characteristics, can combine with gold. Let me focus this for you. It can combine with gold in a continuum that allows you to pull up to 10-20% gold by weight out of this ore. So it's not necessarily that all fool's gold is foolish. This stuff would definitely be worth mining, and is. So keep that in mind as you're looking at these kinds of ores. Here's another piece right here. It's magnetic in its nature, high in iron, but it happens to also, because of its magnetic nature, be ultramafic, and it goes along with gold. This is a piece of magnetite. When you see these things in the bottom of the river, and they're heavy, dense, they form and they collect down where gold collects as well. All of that is an indicator of the potential for gold. And so that's the kind of thing we're going to be looking for when we talk about indicators. Let's see. So for right now, let's go forward to the next level here. I'm going to try to bring all of your questions up front here. We were having a little problem earlier, and I think it's because I needed to get the ID, which I now have. So let me go over to handy dandy chat box number here. Go to the Facebook Live comments section here. Hey, we got you. Okay, so let me turn the autofocus back on. There I am, and there you are. Let's talk about your questions. So I've got Oscar, and we've got Michael. Here we go. We can hear but not see you. Can you see me now? They hear me laughing, and I need to see some gold. Okay. That's a good question. Autofocus is not focusing. Turn it off. So this kind of chunky gold is a particular kind of gold that if you see a lot of, a place we sample, we get a fair amount of this out. And that's why we sample everything and keep it into separate vials. This chunky gold is an indicator that you're near a lode. And the reason is that it rounds very quickly once it gets into a river and starts, down the placer, pay streak. So what you're looking at here was probably recently broken out of some quartz. And it's pretty obvious. No, I have never looked in North Carolina. I have some friends who do. One of the other things you can look for when you're looking for gold that goes along with minerals that go with is, let's see if I can get this right, various forms of corundum. And there's people here in California that have found some diamonds this summer. All of these go in the area of these ultramafics I'm talking about. The serpentine rocks, various forms of iron minerals, and so forth. So gemstones are also found in the same region as gold. Let me see if I can find, this is a little flatter material. You see how these are a little more polished, a little more rounded? And that would indicate that they've been out of the lode longer and going down the stream bed a little while longer. Let's see, who else is on? I've got Oscar, Michael, Miguel, Valencia, and handful of other people. I think I've got a couple of other monitors on right now. Let me get my headset back on just to make sure that I'm not missing something. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is the question, what are your number one questions with regard to gold indicators and rocks and minerals? What kinds of things have you seen that you want to know about? I have a number of people ask me questions from time to time, and or they have pictures of things that they like to share. And it isn't always possible to just jump in and start a dialogue. What I want to try to do with these sessions is give you an opportunity to either come in now or come in next week when we do it again. Well, not next week, but when we do it again. We're going to talk about when and how often. So one of the questions is, how often should we do these? Put your answer in the comment. Once a week, okay? How about Mondays? Is this time a good time for people? Because that was one of the questions, was what was a good time. We used Facebook to kind of tell us, you know, when most people were around on the Facebook fan page. That doesn't necessarily mean people are around for a video talk, but it might be. And I removed my gold that was holding this in place. Sorry about that, but it's getting kind of ornery here. I'm fighting back though. Once a week, Michael? Okay. How about you other guys? Can you guys tell me why you think this rock is flat on one side? Actually, flat on two sides. So really, white quartz is not a good indicator for gold, Michael asks. And the answer is, quartz in general is a fairly good indicator of one kind of thing and one kind of thing only. And that is, this is an indicator that at some time in the history of the rock that this was embedded in, there was a hydrothermal vent. Because the way this comes up is as a very syrupy, if not more like a thick rubber that's melted, that moves up through the rocks, super viscous mixture of quartz and high pressure and temperature water and minerals, lots of minerals, including metals. The problem is the metals may or may not go where this quartz is going, and that's one of the key features. What the quartz will do though is act as an acid leach to pull any metals out of those ultramafic rocks that have all kinds of metals in them, and as well as the mantle itself, and bring them to the surface. And as it comes to the surface, through its twists and turns, through the cracks and fissures that faults form, what's going to happen is the quartz stringer, they call it, will tend to bend. Anywhere there's a bend, you get what's called the piezoelectric effect. You get a buildup in electric field across that quartz. That buildup, just like an electric plater, will cause the material, like the plating on this bolt, to plate out on one side versus the other. When that happens, the metals concentrate. Wherever the metals concentrate, the other side of that, they unconcentrate. They start diluting out. That quartz continues to move on, and what happens is the whiter the quartz, the less content there is in terms of metals and oxides. That's just the fact. Now, that doesn't mean quartz isn't a good indicator. It means quartz by itself indicates there probably isn't any gold. Quartz, when it has a lot of rust in material, may or may not indicate gold, depending upon whether or not there is the right kind of residual metals left in the quartz, things like silver. If there is, then you start looking pretty seriously. But if it's like that piece I showed earlier, where it's this one right here, where it's, you know, looks like somebody's tooth decay, and it basically all corroded out of it. Okay, so there was, and in some of these cases, in many of them, you'll see little cubical holes. Those cubical holes were pyrite, and the pyrite basically formed hydrosulfuric acid, etched out the rest of the iron and some of the quartz, and away it went. What's left is the quartz itself, which is this glass. The problem is there's not much in the way of other valuable minerals with it. Now there can be, so it's not that the quartz is not a good indicator, it's that the quartz isn't the only indicator you're looking for. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question, Michael? So Miguel, are you still on? Good job, Michael. Thank you. I appreciate asking that question. That was a good one. In part because one of the things you'll find in any place where there is a lot of gold is you'll typically find these boulder-sized chunks of quartz float coming down the sides of the mountain. And that may or may not be a good indicator of gold. One of the things you want to look for are places where the quartz float was picked out and stacked, because it's an indicator somebody's been working a lode nearby. They may or may not have found anything. I've wasted a lot of time doing that. That's where a good metal detector comes in handy, like an MD20 or something like that, or a nice gold bug, because then you can kind of sweep over those areas quickly, and if they start pinging off, then you've got something interesting, and that's where you want to use the rest of your gold indicators to assist you in understanding what you're looking at. Because anytime you have these things, we talked about this, let's see, we talked about the physical characteristics, luster. Luster basically is the surface texture, whether it's greasy, waxy, polished, dull, that kind of thing. The color, whether it's dark or light, red, blue, green, yellow, metallic. The crystalline structure, whether it has crystals or not, can be a great indicator of what's going on there, because the more crystalline structure there is, typically the more likely you're going to find things that are related to gold. It just goes with it. Magnetic, again, because of high iron content in magnetite, it not only goes with gold, but when it sinks particularly into a creek bed, you will sink alongside that gold. The gold will sink below it because it's more dense, but it's down in that range, so it'll tend to sink down below everything else, especially the quartz and all the other stuff that's up above it, the sands. The chemistry of gold is kind of unique in that it's not so much the chemistry of the gold as things that it will alloy with, like silver, and that will lead it to being found in certain regimes of materials and metals, including things like it can be found with pyrites, both copper pyrites and arsenopyrites, which are kind of unusual and also poisonous, but it can be found with those things in concentrations that can be worth mining. And so when you find stuff like that, you want to kind of consider whether you should take them and have them sampled and tested safely someplace. Fracture, again, I talked about that conchoidal fracture. There can also be a platy fracture. One of the most common false golds or fool's gold is simply biotite mica, which is kind of a golden looking mineral, and you'll see a lot of it in beach sands and things like that. And if you look at it under a magnifier, you'll see that it has a nice platy structure. That platy structure, basically, when you hit it with a pocket knife, it will tend to split. That's that cleave or fracture. It'll split into little tiny thin sheets, and those sheets will each one have their own little golden colored shiny sparkle to them. And so that's something you want to keep in mind. And the reason I bring that up is that you don't just find them in beach sands. You'll find them in certain kinds of rocks, especially rocks like granites and things like that, which can go along with gold. And so when you're seeing micas, it tends to be something that's kind of like fool's gold, but it may also be something that's in the regime along with gold-looking materials. You're looking to go panning in North Carolina. I would suggest that you check out GPAA, local clubs in North Carolina, South Carolina. There are some people there who know the areas and have access. And if you're finding creeks full of pyrite and quartz, it's not at all unusual. There's good gold down in those areas. And the trick is to find access, because one of the things that's different between, well, I don't know, it's getting that way in the West Coast too, but it used to be a little more open here on the West Coast. Back in the days when it was the Wild West, you could just kind of go out and go prospecting and risk your life, but that's all you did. Now it's getting to where there's like legal hassles everywhere, much more like the East Coast, where places like the state of New York will just, we own all the gold, sorry, you can't have access. So when you're talking North Carolina, you have the same problems we have here, but maybe a little more difficult in terms of having the mineral rights and the access rights to get in there. If you know somebody who has a claim or has access to a claim or private property that you can pan on, that's a great place to go prospect. And pyrite is an indicator. It is not necessarily a good indicator in the sense that you find an awful lot more pyrite than you will find gold, but gold and pyrite do go together, and that's what people won't tell you. That the reason Mark Twain wrote about that was that he was hunting gold. He was hunting in an area that has gold. How do I know? Because I've hunted in the very area he hunted. And so that's something you want to be aware of, is when you look, there are certain things that will go with it, and pyrite is one of them. Chalcopyrite, especially those copper pyrites, like I was showing you, where they don't have that cubical structure or the nice crystalline structure of a iron pyrite. Iron pyrite looks very, very sparkly gold and has a very nice clean structure, either cubic or it can have this octahedral. Okay, and so what happens is when you have these structures, they look really sparkly and clean. If you do the scratch test with your knife, you'll find gold will scrape, so don't scrape too much, but you'll find it very easily is malleable, so it bends. Pyrite does not, it breaks, it fractures. And you'll find lots more little crystals, the same structure that you saw originally, only smaller, because it'll tend to break on those same planes. And that's one indicator. Let's see. One of the things about North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, that whole stretch there's a nice band of gold, pretty much going from about I believe it stretches all the way from southwestern Georgia all the way up through into, I think there's actually like almost under the White House, but on into, there's a couple of mines that are found in that's a long story. It'll come to me in a minute, but words and names of places and people's names are not my forte. You give me a rock, I can tell you about the rock. You give me a person's face, I can tell you about the person, but I can't tell you their name. Baltimore, so you have to wait. It just kind of pops up. So there are mines just outside of Baltimore, and those mines are connected, all of those are connected in a long diagonal band that was one of the earliest gold finds here in the continental United States, and was a very big gold rush in the late 1700s, predating the 1849ers. So it's something here in California. It's just something to know that gold is gold, and it can be found all over the place. So yeah, you got a good idea looking for the quartz and pyrites. The other thing you want to do if you're finding those is make sure you go to bedrock and get those iron particles, the magnetite I was showing you. Only it'll be little tiny particles of what we call black sand. But this is a giant piece of black sand, if you can see this. It's heavy and it's magnetic. And what happens with these things is they will have a magnet around. Where's a magnet when you need one? I say anyhow, but they will tend to collect in the same regions as gold because of their density. So it's something to be aware of, that when you're finding black sands, make sure you can go down in there and collect a bucket or two of that and separate that out using you want to use a lighter flow, more of a separation table or gold table. You could use a gold cube, or Keene has a very lightweight gold fine sluice, black sand sluice. So you see a national forest is legal for recreational gold panning. A lot of people look here also, and that's perfect. And as long as the thing about national forests and national parks and the open access, you can still have claims. I don't know what they are in the national forest, who manages those. Most of the cases, it varies from state to state. So there can be places that it's public access, and there can be places where, well, this claim is already claimed up. So you want to make sure you understand what those are. The easiest way to ask is check with the folks at the National Forest Service headquarters. They're local to you. Here in California, it's a little weird. Most of it's managed by the BLM, but BLM has gotten a little notoriety for not getting it right, including claims overlapping private property and things like that. So they've decided that the best solution for them on that is not to manage any of it. They just kind of hit it all. You still have to file a material, and you still have to, if you want to go find the actual claim, you have to go to the county seat and look it up in the books. It's in a physical book, and open it up to the page and find the actual location. Now, that doesn't mean that the claim is actually staked correctly. That's a whole nother can of worms, and is something that I've gotten a lot of requests about, and that is, how do I know that something's claimed correctly, and how do I place a claim correctly? And there is a kind of an art and science to that, and it varies from county to county, basically. So here in California, it's a little interesting because it really is, it comes down to two places, the BLM and the county seat. And you have to put it in both, and you have to do it in the right sequence on the right date with the right fees, or it becomes null and void. And you don't want that to happen if you have a good claim. So, it's just one of those things. The problem is that if you go to a claim and you don't have access, you can be claim jumping, and that can get you in a whole hot bowl of hot water. And so recreational gold panning, fine. And that's pretty much true here too. You can, in most cases, just go in and pan. What they don't want you using is motorized equipment without permits and all that kind of stuff. And you probably have similar kinds of regulations. And they vary state by state. Let's see. For now, I think that's kind of what I had in mind. What I wanted to find out from you guys is this format going to work? And am I coming through clear enough? Can you hear me okay? And do my rocks show up okay? Yes or no? Part of what we figured we would do with this is give you guys a chance to feed back to me what you want. The objective is simply to serve you with kind of the questions and answers you want answers to, and if I can't get them, I'm going to go find people. We're going to have fun. But the first thing to do is just simply have a base for this. We meet here at a certain time. We're going to do this. So the rocks are clear and the audio is clear. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And so the goal is to kind of create a forum. I don't want to call it a club. Everybody calls these things clubs. Let's see, what do we call this thing? A meeting place, okay? Somewhere we can sit down and chat about the subject we're interested in, which is finding gold. And the subjects I'm interested in, just to give you a background, geology, mineralogy, gold, hydrology, and engineering. I have a background in geosciences. I have a background in electronics and software. I have a background in audio and video, and I also have a background in gold. And so you kind of mix those together and shake well, and that's Prospector Jess. But the purpose of this effort is really to serve you and to kind of give you an opportunity to know me, and for me an opportunity to know you. Because one of the things that I have recognized over the years here, because we've been at this for about 8-10 years now, is there's a need to connect more. And one of the places that we're really good at is on the web, but one of the things we're weak at is with the web. The feedback is not, it's kind of going out and not coming in. And I'd like to make it two-way dialogue. So this is kind of our effort. And hopefully we will all have a lot of fun doing this. I want to make them kind of short, sweet. The goal is make it about a half an hour once a week if we can do it. And then maybe periodically under certain conditions we might do them longer, but it will be I'll be announcing more restrictions on what that is, because that's going to be a little tougher to do. But the goal is to just be frequent enough that we can kind of like bring our stuff in and share. And we might connect a person by Skype and bring them in to put their stuff on display and what they've been playing with to refine gold with and find stuff, and some of the rocks you've been finding in your North Carolina creeks, and what you're seeing when you're panning, and that kind of thing. Because the idea, the concept here is we're all better together than we are apart, and together we can get through a lot of stuff, including a lot of this legal junk you're hearing about, because I know a lot of people have concerns about that. I do. But I also know a lot of people are working on it. I know a few of them personally. And so it would be nice to kind of get them together with us and just talk through some of this, and also do it in the right context. So when we're talking about claims, we can talk about claims and talk about, what the different mining laws are that are changing claims and claim rights. That's the objective. So I'm glad you're enjoying it. I hope to see you again next week, and we will do this again. And same time, same place, Mondays, 6:30 Pacific time, until we tell you otherwise. And let me know if there's a different time or a different place. We'll try to take that into account as we go, but I just wanted to put a stake in the ground where most people seem to have, we're available online, particularly with Facebook, because that's kind of where we hang a lot. So look forward to seeing you guys later. And I think that's closing in on an hour here, although I did get going late. I really, pardon me for the late start. It's technology for you. We have, I think, ironed out the issue. Next time what we're going to do is I can start with this title page up front, and you'll know you're at the right place if you see a title like this waiting for you, because we'll just switch it out when it's time to go live, rather than, what I had to do was kind of switch it on and then found that I didn't have the right ID codes in the right places, and therefore we couldn't talk and you couldn't hear me. So we got that fixed, which I'm really glad to find out. So if there's anything else you have right now, let me know. Otherwise, we'll call it a night. I'm glad you joined us. Prospector Jess, hunting for gold. We'll catch you next week, 6:30, right here on the Hunting for Gold page on Facebook. Join us. Good prospecting, Prospector Jess.